Hello, hi. Um, in the prior video, we looked at two system variables, mouse X and mouse Y. In this tutorial, we will focus on user-defined variables, or variables that you, the programmer, go ahead and create when you code. So in creating your own variables, you have to remember to do two things before you can use them. Number one, declare your variable, and number two, initialize your variable. Then you can go ahead and use them, right? I am going to create a variable called, very creatively, called my var. Let my var, right? Okay. Now, I could name this variable anything. I could name it pink unicorn, or orange clover, or anything else I might want to name it. And in general, when it comes to naming a variable, it is a good idea to think of names that are descriptive, but also not too long or hard to spell, or have too many upper or lowercase characters mixed in, because of course the variable name is case sensitive, and if you are going to write that variable in your code, you could easily drive yourself crazy looking for a capitalized character in a variable if you have a lot of them. But this particular form of my lowercase with capital V A R, this is kind of like a really almost like stereotypical name for a variable. Anyhow, my var, spelled exactly like this, is really different from my var spelled with a lowercase, or, for example, capital M, Y, uppercase V, A, R, or if I were to do M, Y, V, A with an uppercase R. All of those are actually different variables. And the reason I mostly mention that is just so for your own sanity's sake, when you are naming variables and planning out your code, that you kind of think about descriptive variables that can help you remember, along with the comments, what it is that you're tracking, but at the same time you also name them with kind of like memorability, so that you don't accidentally misspell your own variables and then find yourself getting errors and have to constantly go back through your code and actually correct these things, right? So in P5.js, right, data types are often not explicitly declared, unlike in some other programming languages. And so I put, let my var right here. And if I wanted to go ahead and check the value of this variable, right, I could go ahead and use the console again. And I could go ahead and write my var. All right, and let's see what I get. So I get this message back, undefined. And the question is, well, why? Why is that, right? And so it comes back as undefined. And that's because this variable has literally not been defined. I've declared the variable, right? But I haven't assigned a value to it. I have not explicitly initialized the variable by assigning a value. So in that implicit way, what ends up happening is this becomes an undefined variable, right? So for me, in order for me to be able to use this variable, right, I want to be able to also give it a value. So I can say let my var equal to, say, for example, 10. And then if I go ahead and look inside the console, I get a value of 10. This variable is equal to 10. The other thing that I could actually do maybe is use arithmetic to manipulate this variable. My var plus 10, right? And I get the result of 20 in the console. So by assigning a numeric value to my var, I have turned this variable into a number. And as a variable, I can use it to hold a value for something that changes dynamically. Another thing to keep in mind here is that with the idea of global and local variables, P5.js and JavaScript refer to this as the scope. So variables declared up the top of the program, like the one that I declared here, before setup, are considered global, meaning they can be accessed everywhere in the program. I could also go ahead and declare my variable in function draw, all right? Place it here. And in this particular case, the end result would actually be the same. Right? It's still worth 20. It's still equal to 20, but the effect would essentially be the same. But if I wanted that variable to be seen elsewhere in the program, then it won't. It will essentially be undefined anything outside of this specific function. That's called scope, specifically block scope. And this function draw is considered a block. So if I declare the variable within function draw, then its block scope stays within the function, right? And finally, what if I create a variable that doesn't change dynamically in the program? I could use let, but there is actually another term that's used for variables that don't change in value at all, and that might be the word const. For constant, so come up here and I put let, change that to const. My var, right? It's still equal to 20. But let me go ahead and actually change this instead of my var. Let's go ahead and make it it's my constant, my cont. And I'm going to go ahead and switch this to a string. And so a string being a basically series of characters, which is another data type for variables in P5.js. And so console log my constant. Let's see, what is that going to return to me? Happy days. It's going to return it exactly in the format that I specified up at the top, where it's a global variable. At the same time, I could also place this within function draw and get the same result. Happy days. Okay. And so my cont becomes what is called a string, or a line of text. And constants can also be numbers, and variables declared through let can also be strings, right? These data types are applicable to both. The difference really is that the value of a variable varies, while the value of a constant does not. And in this particular example, there isn't really much of a difference actually between the two of them, but you will find that as you're programming and as you begin to actually organize your code in a certain way, it's really helpful to make the distinction, even conceptually, as you're sort of setting up the overall structure of your code.